Hello. So I am here to read a recent blog post I wrote. So hopefully this can support accessibility needs. I'm I have not updated my website around accessibility to have, voice recording. Um, I'm a little bit technologically slow. So this is what I do know how to do. I can record a video. And so I'm just going to read a recent blog post um, and also for those who just are not able to read for whatever reason. Um, so I'm just going to read this word for word. And um, yeah, uh, I published this on my website just a few days ago, December 27th, titled Ketamine and the Ecology of Modern Psychedelic Movement. Ketamine assisted psychotherapy, also known as CAP, can be considered a pioneer psychedelic modality within the current era of drug policy change. A pioneer group is a biological term for a type of life form that moves into an area that has been highly disturbed or disrupted. Pioneer species share characteristics such as being able to operate or thrive with little external support. One example is the Central Coast California regions is the French broom plant, which is in the Fabaceae or legume family. That's the bean family. This plant thrives in highly disturbed areas and is considered by many to be invasive as it is non-native and takes over an area quite easily. French broom is also a nitrogen fixer, which is a characteristic of many plants that help restore damaged soils to support biodiversity in the future. Although this plant takes over an area very easily, ecologists have also noticed that over time, other species of plants are able to integrate after the French broom has served its purpose, so to speak. I'm using the analogy of a pioneer species around the psychedelic movement because many attributes of modern culture have actually thwarted individuals' abilities to explore and develop their own consciousness. Within our social landscape, our abilities to collectively develop have been oppressed. So this cultural ecology can be considered a disturbed or disrupted area. The substance known as ketamine has been entering into the social landscape more and more over the past few years, acting as a pioneer species for the psychedelic movement. While cannabis has also served on the front lines, opening up doors for perception, there is a lot more social stigma around that substance that ketamine simply does not have. Also, because ketamine is manufactured by pharmaceutical companies, there is also a well-established economic and legal infrastructure to promote its use. It is important to note that an article came out from the FDA this past October 2023 warning healthcare practitioners and recipients about the dangers of off-label use of ketamine for psychiatric quote unquote disorders. Excuse me. I do know that it is common practice for medicines to be used for off-label use. In fact, ketamine has been used with great success around mental health challenges such as PTSD, depression, suicidality, and anxiety for over 20 years at this point. I mention this FDA warning because there's a lot of conflicting and just plain confusing information out there. In 2019, the FDA approved ketamine in the form of a nasal spray brand name Spravato, aka S-ketamine, so that this recent warning offers a directly conflicting message to citizens. Since exploitative capitalism has integrated with the healthcare systems, this inherent conflict of interest leads to misleading information and ethical challenges. In any case, it's important to be aware of polarizing arguments when it comes to policy or access to client-centered care. Long-term mood stabilizers, herbs, preventative care, modalities, psychedelics, community-centered care, and other healthcare options ought to be ideally available for all so that each person may have autonomy and choice in their personal care journey. Now, with the recent tragic loss of Matthew Perry, we may see ketamine being demonized as the cause, or even though it was well known that he was struggling with various substances and the cause of death was drowning. Providing education and judgment free spaces for any person managing health challenges is key for mitigating harm. Please always be cautious around mixing substances, as contraindications such as alcohol and ketamine can have extremely harmful and sometimes fatal impacts. Also, be careful to not be alone, use a sober buddy system um, when exploring altered states for safer harm reduction practices. Another relevant note here around specific ketamine frameworks, the acronym CAP, KAP, is used to refer to ketamine assisted psychotherapy, and it's also used to refer to a kink aware professional. My private practice is centered around harm reduction in the form of education and supporting clients in curating their own experience based on how they relate to safety. Because of the abundance of ketamine options at this point and because of the regulatory nature of this pharmaceutical drug, I only work with ketamine if my clients have their own prescription and they're looking for some additional support. I also do not advertise as a kink aware professional, not because I'm not kink aware, but mostly because it's not a niche or speciality of mine. I am comfortable and familiar with kink in general, or as I like to say, kink light. I can support folks with desire discrepancy or healing around kink explorations. Um, so the work around sexual healing, emotional communication skills, we may use somatics or psychedelics or herbal allies as other tools. Often these various avenues for relating to ourselves, the body, and each other are inextricably linked. And so it's just a matter of finding which tools are a good fit for one's tendencies and established comfort zones. Regardless of one's personal goals or challenges, we may be orienting around the somatic. Regardless of one's personal goals or challenges we may be orienting around, the somatic tools can be a great use with the softening or pain reducing impacts of ketamine. These tools can be utilized before or after a session to prepare or integrate as well as while the client is experiencing ketamine, as long as they continue to have access to cognitive functioning. In other words, if the journeyer or the person on ketamine experiencing it begins to drift into a dissociative or other alternative consciousness space, for me, it's not ethical to be manipulating or guiding them with any agenda. This is an ethical boundary that can be applied to any altered state experience, regardless of the substance or lack thereof. This ethics perspective could also be applied to the altered state feeling that can come along with somatic exploration and therefore be applied to identity, sexual, or other personal explorations. So in other words, like somatics can be, considered a mind altering sort of state when you kind of get into um, more of an embodied state and out of the mind, or if you're on like a microdose of cannabis or psilocybin, for example, um, or just feeling, intensely in some way, um, always having, um, you know, my clients are leading the session, so to speak, so that my bias is not holding any sort of agenda. If you are a practitioner or recipient within the mental health care realm and wish for additional support around psychedelics, client-centered care, ethics, somatics, or herbalism, I do offer liberation, education, and empowerment in gaining personal experience safely. So there is an image, looks like a chalkboard with white writing on it that says ketamine. C subscript 13H subscript CINO. It's the the chemical compound of ketamine. That due to the 15 years since I've taken chemistry, I haven't buffered up to be able to describe what this chemical is from the chemist's point of view. Just an image of the chemical compound. Ketamine was first synthesized in 1962 by American scientist Calvin Stevens. It's now understood that the fungus Pochonia Chlamydospora may be a natural source of the chemical as well. And there is a link in the the text here if you want to read more about that. So while I do not think it's fair to reduce the experience of being on ketamine to dissociation, dissociation is a quality in many people's experience with the substance. Just as I personally would not label ketamine as a psychedelic, the experience does have psychedelic characteristics. While this might seem like splitting semantic hairs, I do think it's important to note that as folks are becoming more educated within the field of psychedelics, we aren't simply lumping all these different medicines into psychedelic, like psychoactive experience that really consists of many different types of experiences. The essences of these mind altering substances hold within them nature's technology that goes far beyond human understanding or the aspects of human use. If we are considering systems thinking and deep ecology that encompasses our social landscape and current context, then we might want to consider how these various consciousnesses or medicines are actually working with each other for the betterment of all life, not just humans. Once again, perhaps ketamine is acting as a pioneer species standing at the forefront of the movement, taking a lot of flack, perhaps, as the cultural prison doors are reopening. Just as many other entities, people, or organizations are acting as bridges between worlds, ketamine does so in many ways, including showing up prolifically in both under and above ground spaces. The rich organic soil produced in the layer connecting above and underground spaces are known ecologically as humus or duff. An ecotone is a space where two biomes meet. For example, where the forest meets the meadow is an ecotone. The duff is an ecotone. In nature, ecotones are where the most diversity happens, the intertidal zones where life arose from the depths, or where the deer is eaten as they step out of the shelter of the twigs, all offer emerging or difference in opportunity for more life. This concept is true in our relationships and society as well. The amplification of life affirming ideas or sharing cultural wisdoms all point to expedited adaptation and coevolution. This is what I dream for the psychedelic revolution, that medicalized above ground world and the organic underground could learn and support each other in this forging ahead towards an integrated society. We absolutely all have something to learn from each other. And when healthy power dynamics can play off of each other instead of grabbing at each other, we will increase our potential for healthy societies by the nth degree. After all, is, is dissolving a perceived separateness not a core lesson of the psychedelic experience itself? So, dissociation can be considered the disconnection from one thing to another. This mechanism of our bodies or nervous system supports us from becoming overwhelmed. Dissociation can show up for someone in a way that's chronic or acute, that causes regular problems, or that goes unnoticed. An example of acute dissociation might look like a person feeling numb or detached from their own self, physical, mental, or emotional, like during a sexual experience. One way that dissociation shows up in our culture at large could be how we manage living in a high population density. Dunbar's number is an anthropological idea around how many humans have evolved in groups of approximately 150 individuals, and that is the number of healthy relationships each of us can maintain. Because we live in neighborhoods where we're exposed to much higher numbers of individuals, it's easy for us to become chronically dissociated to help our nervous systems manage the large amount of information that we did not necessarily evolve to process. In my opinion, this is one of the reasons why psychedelics are integrating into the mainstream as this time to support our efficient adaptation to modernity and the challenges it creates. One of the main tenets of client centered healthcare is meeting people where they are at. If we have a cultural epidemic of dissociation, of people lacking embodiment skills or using screens to live a life of spectacle, then we must take this into consideration within our healthcare frameworks. This is one reason why ketamine has been able to integrate and support so many people because of its ability to meet people where they're at around dissociative tendencies. When folks are able to have a bird's eye view of their troubles, this objective perspective can offer great relief from and breathing room to alleviate suffering. And while everyone deserves relief from suffering, it's a fine line to walk in supporting mental health care because of the potential for simply replacing one form of dissociation with another. While I'm not necessarily concerned about this on an individual level because of my values around harm reduction, I see this more as a larger movement issue that there is not a more conversation in the mental health field around the core issues causing the mental health problems. In other words, most people are suffering from mental health challenges as symptoms of living within late capitalism and over individualization, parentheses, at least in the USA, versus not doing enough psychedelics. The wellness industrial complex and the nonprofit industrial complex are very real manifestations of enabling harm for the sake of job creation or maintaining the status quo within a culture that basically devalues nature. I don't mean to disparage those, including myself, doing great care or social work. I just need to highlight that only focusing on the symptoms of a problem and not its root is a sign of lacking integrity within an organization, if holistic care is a stated value. I am an advocate of harm reduction principles, meaning individuals ought to have autonomy and free choice around their healthcare decisions. Harm reduction allows Harm reduction values allow folks to choose what feels empowering for them as opposed to prescribing an overarching standard protocol for each person. So, considering harm reduction values, we need people to be able to reduce symptoms, mitigate harm, and also make choices for themselves. The value of harm reduction could be compared to the value of abstinence, which has in recent history been the only supporting tactic for above ground mental health services offered to those suffering from addiction, chemical addiction. While abstinence might be the best choice for many, it most certainly is not even a realistic choice for most. If a person becomes dependent or just interested in regularly consuming a substance as a coping mechanism to exist in today's world, that person deserves just as much dignity, respect, and support as folks who become addicted to, let's say, working or hoarding material wealth. I'm saying that with somewhat of a tongue in cheek tone to make a point around the reverse stigma in our society that has been created to enable abuse of power around economic classism. This being the actual core cause of most healthcare challenges for both individuals and groups. If you or a loved one or your mental health provider could use extra support around psychedelic liberation education or other mental health support, you can schedule a free call with me through my website. I'll put a link below. There's a couple footnotes when I was talking about, um, invasive species at the beginning, making the analogy to the pioneer species. There's a footnote about um, a book called Beyond the War on Invasives, a permaculture approach to ecosystem restoration by Tao Orion. And then um, when I was talking about dissociation to screens, I think, or Dunbar's number, I'd have to go up and see where the footnote is. Sorry. I'm referencing spectacle theory, um, which, yeah, just as an example of the dissociation being like chronic and socially wide, like a current epidemic. I use spectacle theory as a reference point. And so there's a footnote that says spectacle can also refer to a society that critics describe as dominated by electronic media consumption and surveillance, reducing citizens to spectators by political neutralization. That is from Wikipedia. See also commodity fetishism for more insight around consequences of unchecked like political economy, basically. Um, so that is the end of ketamine and the ecology of modern psychedelic movement. Um, Thank you for listening. I hope this was helpful to have a little bit of a recording here. And please like, share, and subscribe if you feel like you learned something or would like to learn more. I'm also open to feedback and stay free, my friends.